Your generous support makes this ministry possible. Thank you.
Can you learn something about a people from the laws that are supposed to govern their society? Can you learn something about their society by the laws that govern their society? So those are the kind of things I want to discuss this morning. So bring it out, bring your observations. There are a ton of little laws in here. I mean, it's crazy. Everything from fathers not being killed for their sons, that's usually a good idea, to reaping the corners of your field over again. What would you say these laws tell us? Let's begin with who God is. Or go ahead, Rob, you have an observation.
God is concerned for those who are otherwise helpless.
Okay, let's just start with who God is. These are going to be, I think, the timeless principles we're going to pull over into the New Testament, because we can't, last I checked, don't eat all the food on your plate, so that if a poor person wants to come eat it, they can take it off, right? Can't afford lunch today, I'm a faculty member. Can I have that French fry? And then you say, no, you're not supposed to have a French fry. No. Okay, anybody else? That happens, believe me, it happens.
You like
Common
common courtesy?
Can you give me an example?
Like the not taking the man's living in a pledge, not the millstone, not going into his house to take the pledge.
Okay, so this is a good one, right? You're coming to somebody's house to get your collateral for the loan that you gave him. It's one thing for you to say, hey, I'll take that collateral. It's another thing for you to go into his, get out of the way, and say, I want that. And yes, there is how would you feel about that if that happened to you? Isn't there a sort of a demeaning of the person? All right, you have to take this loan out, and now it's not good enough for you to give me what you want to give me. I'm going to go in and pick. Okay, good. So common courtesy for others. I'm not going to be able to. I spelled it right. Yes? Good. Next. I'm terrible with that. Yes, Love?
The word abomination is used several times.
Okay, point them out.
22:5, 23:18, 24:4, and 25.
Mm-hmm.
Among others. Would it be, I guess we can learn about who God is and how he feels about these things, but does that carry over? Does he still think it's an abomination to remarry a wife?
Some things are just abominable. I mean, right? There is this concept with God that not everything is okay. And some things are not just not okay, they are really wicked. We look at taking another wife as horrible. But you know what? That wasn't actually most horrible on God's scale. There were other things that were worse than that. Okay, so your question is a good one. Does he still think those things are bad?
Does the word an abomination, this is an abomination, does that qualify this as an eternal?
Anybody want to weigh in on that? Pick an example, Sarah.
24:4. A woman is discarded by her first husband, marries again, and then she's discarded again, I believe, and then her first husband wants to take her back.
That's right. Let's read it. 24:4. When a man takes a wife, marries her, it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out from his house, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. If the latter husband turns against her and writes her a certificate of divorce, so now this is the second divorce, puts it in her hands and sends her out of her house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her again to be his wife, since she has been defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. So she has one husband, gets divorced, gets another husband, he divorces her too. She can't go back to the first one because she has been defiled. See, it would seem to me that these divorcing relationships, God hates divorce. We know that. So now these constant divorces and the back and forth, what does that say about the marriage relationship? What does that say about the value of this woman who keeps getting shuttled back and forth between men? Those principles, I think, are timeless, and you ever listen to Dr. Laura? If you don't think verses like this apply, just listen to Dr. Laura. I mean, the stuff that people get involved in their lives, it will just curl your hair. It'll go nuts. So I wonder if, yes, God, we know God still hates divorce, and so it would make sense to me that this hopscotch back and forth between these husbands, not a good thing, and he still hates it. Does this law get used again anywhere in the Old Testament? Anybody know? The issue of divorce gets raised in Malachi. God hates divorce, right? Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 1, God says, if a husband divorces his wife and she goes from him and belongs to another man, will he still return to her? Will not the land be completely polluted? You are a harlot with many lovers, yet you turn to me, declares the Lord. The principle here is this wife, he's taking the law from Deuteronomy and applying it to the relationship between Israel and God. This woman who's had one husband and then goes to another one is not allowed to come back to the first one. But Israel is doing exactly that. They're going back and forth. Liz?
I'm a little confused by this law in chapter 24 because it seems like God is so concerned for taking care of women and children, and yet this law seems to allow a man to just be like, leave to his wife. So
the law doesn't address, okay, so it seems that guys can just do whatever they want and divorce their women at will. And you know what? That did seem to be the practice at the time. A couple of things. One, the fact that he has to give her a certificate of divorce, that's important. This is the piece of paper that says you're done, or whatever it was, right? You're out. Listen, just by principle, get things in writing, right? You get. I've done weddings. One person was divorced. There were just cause, but I asked to see the papers. Show me the court documents that say this is done, because you don't want to find out later, it was almost done, but the judge never actually signed it because they never had the $50 to go get it. And you say, oh no, you've got 2 wives, yikes, right? You don't want to do that. So there is a sense in which there is protection built in with this certificate of divorce. But you're right, in as much as the power is in the hands of the man, it appears. That's the culture, that's the society. Nevertheless, that issue is not actually addressed in this law. Right? I mean, if you have a man and a woman, the issue is when she goes to another man, not how this marriage breaks up or whether there's justification for that marriage to break up. Or that's not what's at issue in this law. The issue is when she goes that way and he dies or something, or gets another divorce, can she turn around and come back? This is the issue right here. The Bible's just not really dealing with this over here.
Could you go to a third husband?
Could she go to,
I'm just curious,
like the woman at the well? She had 5 husbands, just over and over and over again. Thankfully, the text doesn't say.
It does say she's defiled.
It does say,
The second man.
right. But see, and so then that raises the question, is that defilement simply because of the first husband? Or is it a defilement that then renders her, unmarriable for any of those serial people along the way, right? Now, as we move into the New Testament, I mean, the commands seem to be a little more refined, right? Better to remain unmarried, and so you don't get the slam dunk in the New Testament, I think, that remarriage is the answer. I'd argue that the New Testament tends to lean towards your marriage breaks up, just stay as you are and don't be so quick to just jump right into another relationship, into another marriage. It's not an airtight case. Some people will argue, some good, trustworthy Bible teachers will argue, there are some instances where that ban is removed. For example, if you get a divorce and then the other person remarries, well, that marriage can never be restored again, right? So you seek restoration until the options are over. Option number one, that other person remarries. Based on this law and in Jeremiah, you can't come back. Game's over. You're now free to go remarry. Option number two would be if that spouse dies. So you get a divorce, the spouse dies. You've been seeking reconciliation, but they're dead. Now you're free to go marry somebody else. That's another option for that. John?
Well, since Jesus kind of attacks this issue in the New Testament a bit when he talks about the certificates, I think God probably didn't, I don't know why God wouldn't lay it out in the Old Testament, but God doesn't change. So when he lays it out in the New Testament, sometimes we always assume, we never really think about backdating the New Testament. We know that that was always true. It's just the Israelites didn't seem to get it, and Jesus had to explain it. But for some reason, God didn't choose to explain it earlier. But I would assume that is true in God's eyes, even 2,000 years before Christ.
Okay, see, so I think you're right. I think this brings the principle that we're trying to get. Some of these things were abominable to God back then, and although we live in a different civil or civic or societal circumstance, the principle behind it is still abominable. When we read in Malachi, God says, I hate divorce. He hates it. He hated it in the Old Testament, and when we cross over into a new dispensation, guess what? There's no reason to think that he stopped hating divorce. There's just no reason to believe that. So it makes sense to say these things we learn about God, many of these, they just come right over. Judging the wicked children with stones. God doesn't like children to be rebellious. We see that commandment come over into the New Testament. Now, the punishment might be different, but that doesn't mean God likes it anymore. He finds it less offensive. No, we just have a different society, a different civil circumstance whereby we don't stone our rebellious children. We give them candy instead. Liz?
I was just wondering, is this the law that Jesus is referring to when he said,
yes,
because of the hardness of your heart?
Yeah. See, and that's the concession right there, right? Because of the hardness of your heart, Moses permitted you to give a certificate of divorce. The assumption is God doesn't like divorce, but you people were stubborn. And so God regulated the system so that you have to give a certificate. And the answer that they interpreted apparently was, well, if we can have a certificate, that must mean God's okay with this. Well, no. The certificate was a way to back you all away from the cliff of ruining all your family relationships. And you misinterpreted that. You should have interpreted that as a concession to the hardness of your heart. Good. Anything else? There are such things that are abominable. Beth?
It seems that God is concerned, and I don't know how well this carries over into the New Testament, but especially in chapter 25, that God is concerned with the propagation of a family name, making sure that happens, and making sure that people aren't known as the family of the unsandaled.
Yeah, okay, so where are you getting that? 25? 25, 5?
5 and 7.
Yep.
And 11 even.
Okay, so this is the context that sets us up for the book of Ruth and some of these other places. When brothers live together, 25:5, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married outside the family to a strange man. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her to himself as wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall assume the name of his dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. But if the man does not desire to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to establish a name for his brother in Israel. He is not willing to perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of this city shall summon him and speak to him. I would suggest an attempt to persuade him. If he persists and says, I don't desire to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the sight of the elders, pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall declare, thus it is to be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. In Israel his name shall be called the house of him whose sandal is removed. Okay, so what's the issue here?
Seems to be like the family line.
Okay, so concern for the extended family line, concern for the name of the brother. Some of these things are societal. Can we back away a little bit from the cultural, and is there a principle here that we could, what does it tell us about God? I mean, can we bring any of this over with us? And we've seen a number of times concern for wives. We've seen concern for children. We've seen concern for the family unit, right? One of the 10 commandments involves a command for the family unit. Could we say that God is concerned about the family? And in that culture, the issue is keeping on this family name. In our culture, it's going to be kind of different. I mean, the expectation I don't think we have in the New Testament at all is levirate marriage. If my brother-in-law, no, it would be the other way around. If I don't have any brothers, and my sister, my wife doesn't. She has one, so it wouldn't work. But I'm not going to take that woman. I'm not going to raise up children. Now, I will say this. I have a friend who, his twin brother died. And he, of course, immediately felt the responsibility to care for this other family, right? In some cultures today, when the husband dies, the wife is thrown out. The children might come to the husband's family, but the wife, she's all her stuff gone, taken, she's out. Why? Well, she's not part of the family. This is the exact opposite, right? Even in the most intimate way, that family is supposed to bring that woman in and raise up through her position in the family again. So, that's very different. Okay, give me another one. Yes, Daniel?
In terms of the harvest, you reap your own harvest in the field and forget a sheep in the field. Don't go back to it. He's seen as a provider for all people. And I don't know, since I grew up on a farm, I kind of see the idea that when I have something that I'm supposed to pick or harvest, you want to get it all, but God here is saying not to.
Okay.
All to yourself.
Okay, good. So God is a provider, but notice he provides through people. You see that? I find that interesting with this particular law. So this is the gleaning law, very famous law. Verse 24, 19, and 20, 21 to 22. When you reap your harvest in your field and you have forgotten a sheaf in the field, don't go back and get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, don't go over the boughs again. Let it be for the alien, the orphan, for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, don't go over it again. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, for the widow. You shall remember you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I'm commanding you to do this thing. God's not providing for these widows and orphans by making grapes and grain and olives fall from the sky. Isn't that interesting? God's not providing for them that way. Has he ever done that in the past? So the issue is not that he can't. Think about the manna in the wilderness. It all fell from the sky. During the days of Elijah and Elisha, the oil jar, poof, poof, there it is, full, and the vat of flour, there it is. It never emptied out. We used to have these evangelists that would come through. Did you ever see that at camp? They'd have these little jars, and they'd fill them with water, and they had a little hole that was hidden in the handle. And they'd tip them out, and it would look like all the water would come out. And they'd set it down, and when they took their finger off that hole, there was a separate reservoir in this cup, and it would refill the bottom. And they'd say, see, and it was a miracle. And then they'd pick it up again, and more water would come out, and the kids would flip out. And it's empty. See, it's empty. And then they'd put it down, and it would fill again secretly. Then they'd do it. And the kids thought miracles were happening right there at Pine Bush Bible Camp. I love this. He provides through people. The expectation is that you're going to be generous. And through your generosity, the poor are going to be provided for. Now, Daniel, in your context, this is good because nobody's walking through your field to harvest corn, right? So we're in a different context today. Your goal is to get as much corn out as you possibly can. How would you bring this over? It almost seems to be random generosity. I pull my keys out of my pocket and $20 falls on the ground. What do? Just leave it. Yeah, right. Sarah?
Oh, maybe there's another law, like in 23:24. If you walk through your neighbor's vineyard, you can go ahead and eat all the grapes you want. So maybe.
But you can't do what?
Put it in a bag.
You can't go harvest your neighbor's vineyard for him.
Maybe the principle is that you just have a mentality that, like, you're the vineyard owner, you just say these grapes aren't really mine.
Okay.
They're rewards, and just assume that anybody walking through can have some, I guess.
Yeah, I think the assumption is people are traveling from place to place. It's not that anytime you want grapes, just go on a walk. Just go walk through your neighborhood.
If your neighbor was walking through your vineyard all the time, do you have the right to stop him? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think that's not the situation that's envisioned. So yes, you could say, all right, I've got my vineyard over here, and the well for water is over here, and my neighbor lives over. And every day he goes to get water, and he walks through my vineyard, and by the end of the season, there's no more vineyard. I don't think but you're right to say that ultimately these things belong to the Lord. And what's a more important Deuteronomic principle? I don't think we've seen it quite that way in Deuteronomy. It's similar. We've seen something else in Deuteronomy. Why can people be generous? Because God will provide. Because God is the provider. And so you're free to be generous because God's going to take care of you. In this case, it's the sheaf. You leave it. The olive tree. Do you understand all these metaphors? When you go through the olive boughs, you whack the trees and get all the olives to fall down. Well, if you don't do a good job, there's still a lot of olives up there. You want to go back, lazy farmhand, and whack them again to get more. No, leave them. Let the poor come out and get them. God provides through people. You should expect that Christians in need, especially, will be provided for. Finish the sentence. Through you. That's right. That should be your expectation. Dave Glock rails on this generation as not the generation of givers, and he's got a point. I wonder sometimes if we forget. Yes, God aims to provide for all those missionaries. God, provide for those missionaries. He's not going to make the money fall from the sky. He has ordained that people are provided for by him through people like you. Liz?
Oh, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay.
I was still thinking of the New Testament principle of how they, or practice of how they gave to each other. Like, they sold their things and shared with each other. And how we can say, oh, those are their culture, they could do that, whatever. But you know what? Like.
Nope. And when they're in need, the Macedonians are giving even out of their need. And they give again and again and again. And Paul says, whoa, this is amazing. You continue to give. Yep. Joel.
Well, in direct relation to that, that's weird because they were selling their stuff when people were in need. And in Deuteronomy, it's more like leftovers. It's more like that, like if they happen to come and they want grapes, they can have them. As opposed to selling your house and giving them grapes.
Well, I wouldn't read it as a leftover. For example, the issue with the sheaf. Have you ever had a bale of hay fall off the truck as you're driving it in, right? Oh, rats, it fell off. And you see, or maybe the rope breaks and you see a line of hay bales out in the field because they all fell off the truck as you were driving. You're going to sell those. So you're going to want to go get those and bring them back in, or you're going to feed them to your cattle. If you don't bring those in, you have to do what? Go buy hay from somebody else. So in this case, you ought to interpret that sheaf as somebody thought he brought it all in and forgot, oh man, there's $10 more laying out in that field. I've got to go get that because I'm going to sell that. But he instead chooses to leave it.
Still though, he didn't mean to leave it behind.
He does now. Now he has to make a choice to sell that for nothing. The same thing with the olives. Okay, I look at my olive trees. All right, this one looks pretty good. Whoa, there's like another $50 still in this tree. I'm gonna go get that. No, I'm gonna sell it for nothing. With the reaping, there's another law. I'm missing it. I think it must be in Leviticus. Don't reap the what? The corners of your field. Now that is intentional, right? That one's totally. So here's your field. When you harvest, I'm making that up. Just leave those parts intentionally untouched, on purpose, so that other people can give. Boy, can we just take a minute and say, what would that look like if Christians did that? If you just said, you know what? I've got some money. I don't need. I'm not going to hoard it. We've seen that already in Deuteronomy. You can't hoard it. And there are people who need it. I'm just going to give it. You're shaking your head.
It's awesome.
There are too many goodies that we want, right? Yeah, Sean.
How does this apply to a strong welfare system as proposed by the democratic government and national health care and things like if we're supposed to be, I don't know, generous with everything, and if these people are not harvesting their fields all the way, wouldn't this, which is an argument today, promote people not working? And we have the principle that we have in the New Testament: if you don't work, you don't eat. Couldn't this set up a group of lazy people?
Notice that what I think God is trying to do when he sets these rules up in this whole context of the book of Deuteronomy is change people's hearts. And so, is there a system set up to help the poor? Yes. Is it an entitlement system whereby the poor can just sit back and because they meet a series of standards, they just do what they're supposed to? They get the check. I don't think so. I don't think that's what's envisioned here. For example, your job is to leave the sheaf in the field if you forget it out of the kindness of your heart because you care about that person. Your job is not to go sell the sheaf and give them money. Right? That's different. What does that person have to do? They have to go get it and then do what with it? Carry it and grind it and bake their own bread, and it's probably just enough for them to survive on. We're not talking about the system that we have today, where as I was growing up, all my friends who were on welfare had the nicest shoes and the nicest TVs and the nicest clothes. That's not what we're talking about here. Olives in the olive trees, somebody's got to come back over and beat those things. It's not your job to give them, olive oil pressed, ready to go. No, they get those olives and they go now do the work. So I think what happens with government is not in charge of, government is less concerned with changing the heart as it is with a redistribution of wealth. And so you don't really care about the poor. But I, as the government, come and say, give me that. And I take it from you. And this person now begins to feel, hey, you're the government, take care of me. Instead of them taking responsibility for themselves, and then I give it to them. And then now they feel entitled to just receiving those checks. My aunt worked for the welfare system in New York City. She has stories that are amazing. And, people coming in demanding the service that they There was this one particular rule where if you met a certain qualification, and it was sort of undercover, the city didn't tell everybody, but there was a loophole. And the word got out in the welfare population, and the people would come in and demand, I want that. And it wasn't that they needed it, it was just suddenly they qualified for it, and so they felt entitled to it. I can check the boxes, I get it, give. I don't think that's the system we have here. And so I don't think whoever wants to set up a stronger welfare net can turn to that kind of system. I like the older systems of the CCC and the WPA and during the Depression that made people go work. They went out and they worked and they got a paycheck and they worked for that money. That is the way to go. It would be nicer, however, if the church took care of its own. Why? Because they cared and they were concerned. And so that people in the church, you would find, would never have to go, and they're not going to get rich off each other, but we would find that our needs were met among the body of Christ. Yeah. If you don't work, you don't eat. That's a good principle.
The welfare system actually is going back to that, where you do have to work for the cash benefits.
Yeah, I wonder why. Because it's going bankrupt. Okay, can you tell me something about society? The society for which these laws were implemented. Yeah, Joel?
I very much see Israel as a little kid. Well, like chapter 22, all the stuff about sex outside of marriage, God could have just said, don't have sex with someone but your wife. I mean, the punishments are different, but still, like, the need to be so specific. I mean, even, like, the whole specific stipulations for Deuteronomy, it's like, you can't just say, don't poke your sister. You have to say, don't poke, and don't get any sticks and poke.
Don't sharpen the sticks and poke.
Just the need to be specific about all this stuff, all the different situations that may come up, makes me think that the assumption is Israel would try to find a loophole around the general stuff.
Can I say the human heart is hard? Right? Stiff-necked is a good application, is a good way of describing it. Yeah, John?
I think it's interesting what you just said, because like, I remember when we were in Israel, you can constantly talk about the Jewish culture, and like we'd always kind of be laughing about like their ways around the laws. Like they still believed in these laws, but they find so many ways around them. Like, I mean, they would tie strings from door and door to the next, so they could go to their neighbor's house on the Sabbath. Like they would somehow make a connection. They would do the most ridiculous things to get around the laws that they say they believed in.
Oh yeah, the one, I just remembered this one. In the cities, if you're a professional and you can't travel X amount on the Shabbat, on the Sabbath, you're allowed to travel home. So what people will do is they'll keep clothes at work, it's a home. They'll keep clothes at another place, it's a home. And then they'll keep clothes at home. And so what you're doing is you're basically just, everywhere you travel, you're going home. And so you can continue to go to you just say, enough. Okay, enough. Okay, good. What else? What else did you say about society? Yes?
This goes along with that, so maybe it's just a sub-point, but humans are really selfish, and so God has to intentionally spell out, this is how you have to be generous.
Yeah, have we not seen, I don't think that's a word we've used, actually. We've always just said be generous. But yes, the opposite of that is the reason he's saying that is because we tend to be selfish. I mean, that's the whole reason he's saying these things. That hasn't really changed much across society. Okay, good. More. That's good.
Mankind has a tendency toward wrong.
Okay.
You shall not. Like, it's assuming they're going to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, sin nature is definitely highlighted. Society has a tendency to, notice the number of times punishments are sort of pulled back, right? You can't kill a father for the sins of his son or a son for the sins of his father. I found a law in the Code of Hammurabi, which is very similar. If a builder constructed a house for a senior, leading man, but did not make his work strong, with the result that the house which he built collapsed, and so has caused the death of the owner of the house, that builder shall be put to death. If it caused the death of a son of the owner, they shall put the son of that builder to death. I mean, that's a great example. You know, dad didn't do his job at work, and somebody got killed, the son got killed, so now, Nathan, come on out, you're going to get killed. Now, you can say that's eye for an eye, you know, but it's a little different when it comes to a whole nother person, I think. So, I mean, even the punishments were cruel at times, and God is, I think, regulating some of them. For example, in 25, 1 through 3, if there's a dispute, the judges decide the case, they find the wicked man, they can beat him 40 times, but no more. Why? So that you don't degrade the individual in your eyes. Sarah?
In 24:16, the law states that each one should be put to death for his own sin. It specifically uses the example of sons shall not be put to death.
Right. That's my point. I mean, I think that's a regulation of what might have been a more common practice in the ancient Near East widely.
You're saying there's like levels? Like the construction worker who fails to make a good roof, and that kills
Somebody else's son, you don't go.
I mean, that seems to be a little bit.
You don't go take the builder's son and kill him. It's a whole nother person. You find some other punishment for that man. I think this law would say, no, you can't do that. You can't put the son to death because of the father. It's backing people away from that practice that's more abusive. It's instead saying, no, kill the father if you have to, but you don't kill the son for the father. If the father was a builder, I think the Romans were famous for this, right? You build a bridge or you build an arch and you're about to take the supports away, who stands under the arch? The builder. Well, that makes sense. Don't put the builder's son under the arch. Yes, Joel?
How do we combine this passage about people not paying for the people's sins with the passage about the illegitimate children, where the 10 generations have to pay the price?
Yeah.
It doesn't say they don't bear consequences. It says don't put them to death. Yeah, I mean, think about it. If the it's just the death thing.
Such a big punishment, you can't do it to the people.
That's right. But if the father loses his job because he's a bad builder, the son's going to go hungry. And that's just a consequence.